King David, during his reign, had gathered a great treasure of gold, silver, brass, and iron for building a house for God on Mount Moriah. This house was to be called the Temple. This temple was supposed to be the most beautiful and the richest building in all the land. David had greatly desired to build this temple, but God said to him that since David had fought many wars, he could not do so. God wanted his son Solomon to construct this temple as his reign would be very peaceful. So, David prepared a great store of precious things for the temple, including stones and cedar to be used in the building. And David said to Solomon, his son, God has promised that there shall be rest and peace in this land while you are king. God also said that he will be with you, and you shall build the house where God shall live among his people. But David had other sons who were older than Solomon. One of these sons, whose name was Adonijah, formed a plan to make himself king. David was now very old, and he was no longer able to go out of his palace and to be seen among the people. One day, Adonijah gathered his friends. Among them were Joab, the general of the army, and Abiathar, one of the two high priests. They met at a place outside the palace and had a great feast. When they were about to crown Adonijah as king, David came to know about it. Though he was old and feeble, he was still wise. He said to his men, "Let us make Solomon the king at once and put an end to the plans of my son Adonijah." So, at David's command, they brought out the mule on which no one but the king was allowed to ride. Soon, Solomon rode on it and came down to the valley of Gihon, with the king's guards, nobles, and all the great men of the kingdom. Then Zadok the priest took the horn from the tabernacle and filled it with the holy oil that was used for anointing by the priests. He poured oil from this horn on the head of Solomon. At this, the priests blew the trumpets, and all the people cried aloud, "God, save King Solomon!" Meanwhile, Adonijah, Joab, and their friends who were not far away were feasting and making merry, intending to make Adonijah the next king after David. When they heard the sound of trumpets and the shouting of the people, Joab said, "What could this rejoicing be for?" A moment later, Jonathan, the son of Abiathar, came running. "Our King David has made Solomon the next king, and he has just been anointed in Gihon. All the princes and the heads of the army are with him, and the people are rejoicing." When Adonijah and his friends heard this, they were filled with fear. Adonijah hastened to the altar of God and knelt before it. As this was a holy place, he hoped that there Solomon might have mercy on him. Seeing this, Solomon said, "If Adonijah will do the right things and be true to me as the king of Israel, no harm must come to him. But if he does anything wrong, he shall die." Adonijah came down before the king Solomon and promised to obey him. A few days later, David sent for Solomon. Lying on his bed, he gave his last advice to Solomon. And soon after that, David died, an old man, having reigned for 40 years, 7 years over the tribe of Judah at Hebron, and 33 years over all Israel and Jerusalem. He was buried with great honor on Mount Zion, and his tomb stood for many years. King Solomon was not more than 20 years when he became the king of Israel, but he took great care of his majestic land. He had no wars, but had a lot of peace at home and abroad. Soon after Solomon became king, he went to Gibeon, a few miles north of Jerusalem, stood until the great temple was built. Solomon made offerings and worshipped the God of Israel, and that night God spoke to him. "Ask me for anything you want, and I will give it to you." So Solomon said to God, "O Lord, you have always been kind to my father, and now you have made me the king. But I am only a child. O Lord, I know not how to rule these great people. Give me wisdom and knowledge, that I may judge these people and may rule them properly." The Lord was pleased with Solomon. He said, "Since you have not asked anything worldly, but for wisdom and knowledge, I will give you wisdom greater than that of any king before you, and greater than that of any king that shall come after you. I will give you not only wisdom, but also honor and riches, and you will obey my words. You shall have long life, and shall rule for many years." Soon Solomon woke up and found that it was a dream. But this dream came true, for God gave to Solomon all that he had promised. Finally, during the reign of Solomon, the work of the temple began. The walls were made of stone and the roof of cedar. Outside of the temple building were rooms for the priests. In these rooms, the priests lived while they were staying at the temple to worship. 7 years were spent in building the temple. At last, it was completed. A great service was held then. Many offerings were made, and King Solomon knelt upon a platform in front of the altar and offered a prayer to God before all of the people. One night, God appeared to Solomon in a dream for the second time, and the Lord said to Solomon, "I have heard your prayer. I will dwell in this house only if you will obey my will, and your throne shall also stand forever. But if you turn away from me, then I will leave this house, and let the enemies of Israel destroy this house that was built for me."